Welcome back to another episode of the Collaborative IEP podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host, and I am so happy you are here. Today's topic is near and dear to my heart at the beginning of this school year. We are going to talk about common pitfalls to the beginning of school. And while this is somewhat of a pep talk to myself, it is also something that kind of encapsulates a lot of the issues that my clients face at the beginning of school years. And the overarching theme here is don't freak out. There are lots of things that we can do to overcome these pitfalls, but if we start to freak out, we are not our best selves. And a lot of the things that we need to do require our best selves. So, yes, it's hard. Sometimes nearly impossible to not get like discouraged and down and frustrated and all the things. But if you get to the point where you're like, I just can't do it anymore, you might want to like pause and reconsider, right? And maybe that's when you have somebody else step in to help you, like an advocate or a partner or a friend or somebody else that can help you because we need the best you in order to get going. I was talking to another advocate about one of these cases today, and I think this is really important to say at the beginning of this episode, especially if things were really, really great at the end of the year. It is way too early legally to start to freak out because you can't succeed in a due process case with 3 weeks of evidence, 3 weeks of failure in very many cases. Like, yes, of course, there are situations where that would work, but most of the time you have to give the school ample opportunity, right, to do their jobs. And so, you know, there is an element of like collaboration, sticking it out, waiting for a second. And what I told her, I think is it's a sad truth, but it's really important. And I say this to clients all the time. I had a divorce case one time where, like, it was just a recipe for disaster. And so I went in sometimes attorneys can go in and, like, talk to the judge with permission, obviously, not like, without any permission, but so both attorneys, mom and dad, or both partners, attorneys go back into chambers and will say, if we were to present this issue to you, how would you rule? And so I went back and I said, all of these things are leading to like things are unraveling and we really need to change because these kids are going to get dragged through all of these terrible circumstances. And the judge looked at me and he was like, but none of that has really happened, right? Like the writing's on the wall. I think we can all agree the writing's on the wall. And I'm like, right. And he said, but you know as well as I do that I can't land the airplane until all of the parts have fallen off of it. And I was like, right, good point. And I said, nobody cares about Nebraska because the wheels are falling off over Nebraska and the wings are falling off over Idaho. Nobody cares about that. But when the entire plane is dismantled, then somebody will step in and do something. And I just think it's a good analogy. It is kind of an unfortunate truth. And that is like a really extreme analogy, but I do think it's helpful. So I thought I would share that here at the beginning of this episode. So I've got a list of pitfalls over here and we're going to go through them. I've got about 14, but it's kind of rambly a rambly outline of sorts just to keep me on track. So when you think about the school year, you think about like all of the things that are happening for us, right? Like all of the things that are happening at school or at home. It is chaos. We're trying to make sure we have all the school supplies. A lot of us are buying new shoes and new backpacks and new lunch boxes. And we're getting back into the routine of packing lunch. And you aren't going to your day camp. You aren't going to your nanny. You aren't going to the pool. You aren't going to practice. You're going to school. For a lot of kids with disabilities, we've got a little bit of like school aversion. So the idea of going to school is difficult, much less putting on the school clothes and, and riding the bus and all of the social pressure. And, then there's all the weird nuancy things. Like maybe one of your siblings just turned 16. So now you're getting a ride to school with your sibling. And then that like is enough to throw a wrench in it. Maybe you worked really, really hard with a tutor, and so you feel like you have made incredible progress over the summer, and then that throws a little bit of a wrench into things. Maybe a kid had a fight with their best friend, and so that throws a wrench into things. But there's like, you know, back to school chaos, and then there's like transition type chaos that's happening. Mm, And then at schools, there's also all kinds of chaos. There's always politics at school, a lot of women that work together. But there's all kinds of politics that are happening inside schools. There's also new people. So people, are coming into teams, and IEP, the facilitation of an IEP takes a lot of people. So because it takes a lot of people, chances are there's a lot of people. There's a lot, sorry, chances are there's a lot of new people. So, in any team, you're probably going to get new teachers, instructional assistants, related service professionals, administrators, counselors, chairs, those kind of folks. And they are coming from their professional development, which most teachers have thought was annoying. So they're kind of like disenfranchised. They've gotten their room set up. Sometimes they're learning new curricula, they're learning new students, and they're learning new families in the case of special education. So it is a lot. It is a lot to do. And so we've got chaos at home and they've got chaos. And then we have this process of educating students that are on IEPs that requires, I make no bones about this, requires a lot of communication. And unless you had this exact team last year, which like I said is unlikely, you're going to have communication patterns that just aren't developed yet. And that's okay, but it can be extremely frustrating. So you're going to have patterns where nobody knows whom you're supposed to contact, what kind of information they want, what kind of information they don't need, and then what actions people are expecting as a result of those various communications. So we don't know how, when, and what to communicate about. And, this can lead to a lot of frustration because there's like misunderstanding or there is worry. And sometimes the worry is unnecessary, right? Like, sometimes I say, well, gosh, they could have like solved the Pythagorean theorem or something. Is that what's called? Theorem, whatever, and we don't know, and then that can take you down a rabbit hole, right? Like I'm always like, trust your gut, trust your gut, trust your gut. But it's hard not to be like, well, I heard this issue arose and I haven't heard that it's not arising. And like, oh my gosh, what if they're not eating? Or what if they're being aggressive to their peers? Or what if they're continuing to elope? Or, fill in the blank with all of the different things that could happen. So sometimes alarm bells go off and we don't get resolution. Sometimes no communication is happening, which then causes our alarm bells to go off. But regardless, this is because of underdeveloped communication patterns. I think a horrendously helpful solution to that is obviously to start the communication at the beginning of the year or before the beginning of the year. And in that back to school email or your first Sunday email or whatever those things are, to say, I plan to communicate this frequently. This is the information that I typically provide from home and from the community. And this is the kind of information that I prefer. And then, in order to maintain that collaborative spirit, you say, and I'm welcome to additional suggestions on what to communicate about, how often to communicate, and when you would like communication. So, how? Like, does it have to be in an email or can it be a call? That sort of thing. So I think that can be extremely frustrating and disenfranchising, if that's a word. But I also think like proactivity can really, really help. And then another solution that I have to give to clients a lot on communication is so start with the teacher. And I usually, for most communications, say the entire team, right? Like everybody on the team. And then if that doesn't, unless it's like one off, I mean, there's plenty of times that I think it's appropriate to just write one teacher. But then if you don't get appropriate responses there, then go to the next person in like the hierarchy. So then I would like stick on the special education side for most issues. And I don't know if you would go to the special education department chair or if you would go to the administrator that usually like chairs your IEP meetings. So that could be like a school counselor or a principal or an assistant principal or like a building special education lead. There are all kinds of different people depending on the school and the school district. And then I usually give that person 48 hours to respond. So 24 for teachers, 48 for that person. And then you just keep working your way up. So you go up to the board office and you go to like an assistant super or bleh, an assistant director of special education and see if that person has any suggestions. And then you go to the director of special education, and then you can go to the assistant superintendents in charge of these people. And like you work your way up. Now, when we were in school, there weren't this many stops from special education to, like the head honcho superintendent or president or whoever that is at your school district. But nowadays there's a lot of stops. And honestly, I don't think that's such a bad thing. Also, along the way, you might loop people in. So you might be like, you know what? That's a great idea. Let's bring in the behaviorist. You know what? You're right. The music teacher had wonderful insight. Or what about last year's teacher? Or what about whatever? And like bringing those people in, I think that can be super helpful. So I like this kind of like 24 or 48-hour thing, and then we just keep going up, and we're like, "I need somebody to help me." So, okay, communication patterns. Number 2, schedule changes. At the beginning of the school year, everybody's schedules are completely willy-nilly, and that can be really hard. So, if you ever feel frustrated and irritated by a school administrator, and you're like, I need to be more reasonable, here is your solution. Ask them, can I please see your master calendar? They will take you to the conference room. And on a whiteboard will be this grid of every single teacher's name, every single class period, and what every person in that building is teaching at that time. And what you have to think about, excuse me, is that the kids that take German 3 are not taking French 2, and the kids that take German 3 can't be together all 7 periods of the day, and so they have to, there have to be, like, 2 different math classes that are available for the kids that take German 3, and, like, the logistics of the master schedule, organizing everybody's planning period, and then you have vertical and horizontal planning, and everybody's lunch, and where kids are, quote, unquote, "tracked" is a disaster, okay? And then we have kids where that are schedule sensitive, right? Like, we can't wait until 2 o'clock to teach somebody to read when reading is a struggle because they are exhausted, unless we have to teach them at 2 o'clock because that's when their nourishment and their medication and all of the things are, like, at the prime. And that's exactly the point is our kids that are on IEPs might need schedule specific things. And so we might try something and be like, this is failing. This is awful. We can't have lunch at this time, or we can't receive our specially designed instruction this time, or these 2 teachers in a row are boring and we need to get up and get moving. And then also, schools kind of have to put schedules into place in order to see if they're working, especially if they're new. And so the scheduling is just crazy. Now, a huge problem with that is sure, we can be patient, we can work it out. Mistakes, it's not even like mistakes happen, just like chaos happens. However, what happens when this happens is kids that are on IEPs oftentimes are missing out on instructional minutes, and that is not okay. So we have to document or we have to address this and say, it was my understanding that we were going to get our math calculation, specially designed instruction on day one. School's in session. I'm supposed to be getting my SDI, and I want to know what's happening. And if not, we need to make up that time. Now, what I typically tell my families is, we have to allow time for schools to get baseline data, to get learner profiles, to relationship build, and all of that kind of stuff. So, like, if you're not seeing Orton Gillingham or Touch Points Math or, whatever instruction on day one, then, I would expect it by day 6, maybe like a first full week of school. But I would be communicating and saying, hey, just curious, like, we're really excited for the reading instruction to get started. Any idea on how like any insight into how that's going would be super helpful. Okay. So something like that would be super good. All right. Pitfall number 3 is the coordination amongst your team members. This is a really hard pitfall to address from the parent perspective. But like we were saying in pitfall number 1, there are all kinds of people that are really essential to the implementation of an IEP. So there are the general education teachers, the special education teachers, the related service professionals, the some school staff that are or maybe aren't on the IEP, like the school counselor and the school nurse and those folks. There are the administrators and various other leads. And so all of those people have to communicate. Some of them are co-teaching and co-planning and co-treating and cooperating in other ways and collaborating in other ways. And um it takes a second for them to get into a rhythm. So a lot of times I see parents getting frustrated on, I haven't heard from the OT, I haven't heard from the speech therapist. The school psych is getting in the way. A lot of times I hear those in the year after in an amazing year. Like, oh, last year everything was so great in 4th grade, and now we're in 5th grade, and like the bottom fell out. Gen Ed used to talk to special ed every day. They had lunch together and they worked through blah blah blah. So again, we do need to be patient for those communication patterns and rhythms of collaboration to occur. I liked how I wrote that, so I had to go read it. Rhythms of collaboration. But it's true, like that's what it really is. So that's possible, but we don't want for our goals and implementation of strategy, right? Like the teaching strategy to get siloed because the grown-ups can't get their acts together. And the other problem is we're just sitting here trying to do our own jobs or trying to cook dinner. And like, how in the heck do we say, knock, knock, OT, have you talked to PT? My solution for this is, in fact, including everybody on communication, because I think then they've all seen what you've said and they've all gotten it with your tone. It's not secondhand. It's not, you don't have to call any big meetings, all of that stuff. And so I think that's the baseline most important thing is to put everybody on your communication so that all of those folks know it. So coordination amongst team members might take a second, but if you can approach it from a positive perspective with everybody on the same email, I think you have a larger chance of success. This one is admittedly tricky, but I might send an email that says something to the extent of, "Hey, everybody, thanks for a great second week. We are really excited to really hit the ground running." Usually after Labor Day, I send a message and say, like, surprise, we don't really do much about school until after Labor Day ourselves because we're pool people, but we're really excited to fill in the blank. And, I did want to check in and see if you, Mrs. Speech Teacher, had talked to you, Mrs. Special Education Teacher, about phonological processing or whatever the thing is. This year, I'm not doing that. Like this year, we really hit the ground running with high school. So that doesn't apply to my family, but I usually give them a little clue into what's going on with us and then say, I did want to check in to see where we are in this, or at our spring AP meeting, I was really excited to discuss blah, blah, blah. I thought I would try to check in on it regularly. Where are we on that? I don't need a long explanation, but a little check-in would be great, right? And then you're kind of putting it on their radar. And you're trying to be like collaborative and understanding that things are crazy for them. Yada yada yada. Another huge issue that I see is oversimplified reporting. Nothing drives me more crazy. Nothing in the world drives me more crazy than good day, bad day. Like, I cannot stand it. I finally said to a teacher one time when Jack was really little, I think it was preschool, I was like, listen, Jack Barlow's going to pull hair. He is going to hit. He is going to yell. He is going to run out of here. I know those things are going to happen. If they don't happen with any kind of pattern, that would be great to know. However, I don't need to know that he pulled somebody's hair again. I don't need to know that he pulled that little blonde girl's hair again. Like, that's going to happen. If you expect anything else, that's the definition of insanity, right? And so sensory seekers are going to sensory seek, haters going to hate, shakers going to shake. And I don't need to necessarily know that. Mm, But the like, oh, this was a good day or this was a bad day. I'm like, how would you like for your spouse to lie down in bed next to you and be like, you had a good day today, right in front of you, or to say to your kids, Mom had a good day today. Like, no, but if you don't say it about or feel comfortable saying it about neurotypical people, you should not feel comfortable saying it about neurodiverse people. End of story. So good day, bad day really bothers me. And actually, any communication in front of the child really bothers me as well. But, I think it's therefore, both therefore and also independently. I think it's really important, again, and we talked about this before, to just be on the same page about what kind of communication you want. When Jack was in elementary school, and still to a certain extent now, because he's at a new school with a new team, I want to know more about like what he's doing at school. In elementary school, I wanted to know because I supplemented so much. So, if they were working on a unit that I could supplement with crafts and books and ideas and conversations, I was going to do it. If they were experiencing, like if they were preparing for a field trip or some kind of big experience, I knew that I could go out and find other things. And sometimes I would even take him to the field trip place first so that he could like get excited about it. And now I want to know, like, where is he? Is he having trouble accessing the curriculum? How are we assessing his comprehension? That kind of stuff. Because again, I want to make sure that he's like interested in what he is learning and that it's accessible to him. And, sometimes no news is good news, right? Like in middle school, I didn't have to ask those questions because we had established patterns where I knew those things were happening and I knew that I would hear if they weren't. But when it's new, it's important to ask those questions again. So, like, what information do you want to hear? And then how do you want to hear it? How often do you want to hear it? That kind of thing can be super helpful. a lot of times schools will get frustrated because they'll be like, well, together with the mom, we developed this communication page and we sent that home every day in third grade. And now they want such and such in fourth grade. And I'm like, well, yeah, people develop. And people are different. So the third grade team is different than the fourth grade team. And so there's different stuff to communicate, like not that big of a deal. Okay, so moving on to pitfall number 5, mm, lack of school-wide communication for special education students. I will tattle a little bit on my district because this is a classic example of this. At open house, my older kid, Griffin, would come home with like his schedule. He would handwrite a schedule on this half sheet of paper, and then he would text it to us during the day, and then he would bring it home to us, and I would take a picture, and then I would take it up to school with me, and I would walk through his schedule, and it had his class schedule, and then it had the room numbers. And this year we went to open house, and I was like, oh shoot, I didn't get a schedule. And so I got up there and I was like, "Hey, can I have Jack's schedule?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." I took a picture of it on a computer screen. I'm like, "Great." Well, then I start trying to navigate to like the I don't know, it's third period or something where I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't have the room numbers. So like a big problem is when the special education students don't get supports for school-wide stuff. So they don't know when tickets are on sale to a dance. They don't know where to sign up for a certain club. There might be a club that they would love to attend, but they don't know how to sign up for it, or a sport. They miss out on these other things. And nowadays there are parents that are organizing everybody wear a t-shirt for the first day of school and everybody do this for that. And if parents aren't really cued into the community, whether that's the class or a sport or the PTO or whatever it is, the special education student is not coming home to say, oh, mom, can you figure out how to buy this t-shirt? Right. And so there has to be I call these people champions. There have to be champions in schools that are like, hey, we can help you. And we're going to help keep those lines of communication open so that you can know about the raffle tickets for your school festival and that stuff. So that can be super duper helpful. Okay, so that's number 5. Number 6, I have written down delays in services, and we talked about that through one lens. Another way that services get delayed is hiring. Sometimes they lose staff, right? They just can't hire enough people, or excuse me, right at the end of summer, people start moving around. So, somebody takes an administrator position and then somebody has to fill that classroom and then somebody has to fill that classroom and then da 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 da, the dominoes fall. And so now everybody's in a new role. And that happens a lot at school. But, you know, because of staffing or because of paperwork relative to the child, or I haven't ever seen it for funding, but there might be some that even funding matters, we're delaying services. And obviously the solution there is compensatory education. Your child is entitled to their minutes. And so the resolution to those is compensatory services. And I think that is, a super just straightforward issue. The only other thing that I want to talk about as a pitfall is failure to implement any of the accommodations and modifications from day one. Because I see this as something that schools really struggle with, and like struggle with understanding, which kind of like is crazy from our perspective. But I think I have a good solution to that. So a lot of times I have, people that are like, I need an emergency meeting in the fall. Like, we got to get on the same page. My kid isn't getting what they're entitled to. And I'll get into the nitty gritty. Like, I'll pull up the supplemental aids and services and I'm like, what are we looking for? Like, what is not happening? And And sure enough, they aren't happening, and so the child's, like, willy-nilly, and this happened actually a lot with kids that mask pretty well and with kids with SLDs, and I think the reason it happens with kids with SLDs is the teachers, like, they're just cruising into the school year, and it could be a couple weeks before they even know a kid is on a 504 or an IEP. That's their fault. I'm not saying that it's anybody other than their fault, but, like, what alert. So it cannot be more clear. If you have a child that can communicate and advocate for themselves until they are in 12th grade, every single year, by the first day of school, be like, hey, I'm Susie. I'm Johnny's mom. And Johnny's got a 504. I am certain that you've read it, but I'm going to attach it here. And these are a couple things I want to highlight. Thanks so much. We are excited to work with you. Anything comes up, you just email or text me because you want to be on their radar, right? Like the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So, as it then applies to accommodations and modifications, I think the kids aren't like, "Oh, I get extra time," or, "Oh, I get preferential seating." And a lot of times it's the executive functioning supports that, like, we put in there, to help them, and then they don't have the executive functioning to get the support. And I'm like, why are we relying on kids with ADHD and executive functioning difficulties to advocate for themselves? Like, this is hilarious. So, but I think the big problem is schools don't understand how quickly that unravels us and how quickly we get frustrated. So I think really, like, in this particular case, it's really about provoking empathy. So are you seeing psychosomatic changes in your child as a result of these things? Lots of times parents will come to me and say, my kid isn't sleeping, or they don't want to go to school, or they are just completely exhausted. And it's because they're so frustrated and exasperated by the lack of supports at school. Like all day long, they feel like they're just floundering, like a fish out of water. And then I also see circumstances where parents communicate before, and then it doesn't happen. And in those cases, I say at that time you need to call a meeting because you need to be like, somewhere, somehow inside this chain of communication between all the people, the messages aren't clear. Because, like, every time I say something, people are like, "Yes, we will do that," but then it's not happening in actuality. So we need everybody at the same table so that we can figure out where the breakdown is, and traditionally, that will be helpful. So, I hope that helps you on board for the school year. I have navigated a lot of pitfalls for clients already, and not all of my clients are back in school yet. So some proactive, some reactive, but we're going to keep on plowing forward to see just how great of a school year it can be. I hope you have a wonderful day. I will see you next time. Same time, same place.